Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 38. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. Welcome. If this is the first time that you're joining the show, watching it, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you're returning back from another episode, glad to see you returning, and always glad to have you here. With that being said, if you need to grab a snack or a drink or something to get you through the content, make sure you go grab that real quick. And with that being said, let's hop into the articles. All right. So first article here, Cyber Force measure expected to resurface in House defense bill debate. Members of the House Armed Services Committee, and this is in the United States, are prepared to push a bipartisan proposal that would require the Pentagon to study establishing a military cyber service. The measure expected to be offered as an amendment during the panel's markup of the fiscal 2025 Defense Authorization Bill on Wednesday would require the Defense Department to tap the National Academy of Sciences to conduct an independent evaluation of establishing a separate uniform cyber force. Now, I've talked about the cyber force and this whole idea on this show and on this channel, but the idea is that we have the Navy, we have the Marines, we have the Army, we have the Air Force, we have the Space Force, and they're basically looking at creating a new separate force, a cyber force, specifically to deal with cybersecurity things. Now, there's a quote here. It says, "It's no secret that cyberspace, cyber war, cyber threat, cyber risk is growing exponentially, not just nationally, but globally," Luttrell, a former Navy SEAL, said last week during an interview in his Capitol Hill office. This report language is going to really bring out the necessity of a cyber force, something that operates specifically in this cyberspace, he told Recorded Future News, adding the existing digital warfighting branches are siloed to their respective services. Creation of a cyber force would follow the formation of the Space Force in 2019. It was the first new branch of the U.S. military in 72 years. So what he is basically saying, and what is true, is all of these branches kind of act in their own siloed world. So they have their own cybersecurity people, their own IT people, and they're kind of acting within that space instead of a collaborative force where there is a bunch of cyber people, a bunch of IT people that are focused kind of on the same mission. Because all these people in these different branches, they're focused on their mission of their branch. So if you're in the Navy, if you're in the Marines, if you're in the Army, if you're in the Air Force, if you're in the Space Force, you're focused on the mission of that branch and not of the collective. And that's kind of the idea here. The new bipartisan amendment would task the National Academy, which does not have close ties to DoD, which is always a concern, conflict of interest, with examining several policy aspects of creating a new armed service, including lessons learned from standing up the Space Force. It also contains a prohibition against interference that warns no Pentagon personnel can tamper with the report's findings. So again, we just had the Space Force created not that long ago, a few years ago, 2019, and before that, there was not a new force created for a while. So there are definitely, I'm sure, some lessons to be learned about how to roll that out, how to structure things. Especially one of the things that is always talked about in the cyber kind of realm for the military is, do the people that are in those positions, do they need to do things like the physical fitness testing? Because they're not typically going to be deployed overseas. They're probably going to be stationed here in the United States. Maybe they'll have people spread out throughout the world, but they're not going to be the ones that are on the front line that are going to raid certain cities or check out certain cities and kind of maneuver in that capacity. So it's this interesting debate. I'm sure with Space Force, it was the same kind of debate, because if you're going to be stationed in the United States, for example, and you're not going to go to space, do you need to meet the same standards that somebody going to space would need to make? Same kind of argument, debate, and situation with that, except we're just talking about cyberspace instead of actual space. And really with cyberspace too, it's kind of across the board, because everybody in that realm is dealing with cyberspace. All right, let's go to the next article here. And before we do that too, make sure that you go to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. And you can see the article feed and everything that we cover, as well as other episodes, articles we have, and other articles that we add just in general that we don't necessarily cover in the episodes. All right, next article here, Foxit PDF reader flaw exploited by hackers to deliver diverse malware arsenal. And they give this nice screenshot here, or this nice image, which we'll talk about here in a second. Multiple threat actors are weaponizing a design flaw in Foxit PDF reader to deliver a variety of malware, such as Agent Tesla, Async Rat, DC Rat, Nanocore Rat, NG Rat, Pony, Rimcos Rat, and Xworm. Quote here says, this exploit triggers security warnings that could deceive unsuspecting users into executing harmful commands, Checkpoint said in a technical report. This exploit has been used by multiple threat actors, from e-crime to espionage. It's worth noting that Adobe Acrobat Reader, which is more prevalent in sandboxes or antivirus solutions, is not susceptible to this specific exploit, thus contributing to the campaign's low detection rate. Of course, because if Acrobat Reader was vulnerable to this, you have Adobe behind it, and certainly they have the resources to patch or identify vulnerabilities that they can fix. So the more commonplace or the larger target that you go after as an attacker, certainly the more likely you are at being identified as far as your exploit, your vulnerability, and that being patched, and then you kind of lose access to that. It's true with penetration testing and ethical hacking research, all of those things, right? Not just malicious threat actors, but that's the idea, right? Once a user clicks OK, they're displayed a second pop-up warning that the file is about to execute additional commands with the option open set as the default. The command triggered is then used to download and execute a malicious payload hosted on Discord's Content Delivery Network, CDN. So we have talked about this before. Typically, malicious or malware is not going to execute everything in one shot. It's not, I downloaded this executable or this file, I open this, and then that is everything inside of there, because certainly from a detection standpoint, that makes it far easier for software like antivirus software, like Defender and things like that, to identify the signatures and the patterns of those pieces of software. Typically, you will download whatever the file is or the application, the malware, and then that reaches back to some other server and will download additional stages or conduct additional stages and grab additional payloads that kind of builds this malware on the go. We see that actually with this image. That's what I was talking about as far as this image. So this kind of outlines the process. Get a malicious PDF. It goes ahead and executes, it looks like to be PowerShell commands, and then grabs a downloader, some kind of executable that's malicious, and then it starts firing off these different requests to continue that process. Checkpoint said it identified a PDF document bearing a military theme that, when opened via Foxit PDF Reader, executed a command to fetch a downloader that in turn retrieved 2 executables to collect and upload data. So those were those additional ones on there, including documents, images, archive files, and databases to a command and control server, so a C2 server. Pretty standard stuff, right? The activity assessed to be geared towards espionage has been linked to Do Not Team, aka APT-C35, and Origami Elephant, citing overlaps with previously observed tactics and techniques associated with a threat actor. So we see that a lot where, again, just because a group changes their name or we see a new name does not mean they were not a pre-existing group that has kind of just pivoted or members got irritated and, I don't know, overthrew their leader, or their leader got arrested, something like that. And they've kind of pivoted to try to obfuscate their activities. But we see common trends, we see common techniques that are used, and that's how we build this profile on those groups and are able to link it back to those pre-existing groups. It also says, interestingly, some of the booby trap PDF files are distributed via Facebook. So certainly social media and the emergence and the growing adoption of social media has led to a relatively effective way of distributing malware, because a lot of these platforms do not identify it, they do not stop it. And certainly there's a lot of people on those platforms that are not technically savvy or savvy enough to identify certain kinds of malware or things that they shouldn't be doing. And a lot of times people are going to click on the file, download the file, do whatever they need to do for that, and they're going to get infected as a result. Next article here, 2 students find security bug that could let millions do laundry for free. 2 students, Alexander Sherbrook and Ikov Taranenko, apparently exploited an API for the Machines app to do things like remotely command them to work without payment and update a laundry account to show it had millions of dollars in it. Uh-oh, that's not good. No! Company that owns the Machines, CSC Service Works, claims to have more than 1 million laundry and vending machines in service at colleges, multi-housing communities, laundromats, and more in the US, Canada, and Europe. It says the lack of response that they got from the actual vendor led them to tell others about their findings. That includes that the company had published a list of commands, which the 2 told TechCrunch enables connecting to all of CSC's network-connected laundry machines. CSC ServiceWorks didn't immediately respond to the Verge request for comment. So I think as a company, this is one of those things you have to be really careful about, because in the hacking world, there's this idea of, I want to disclose a vulnerability. I want to take credit for this exploit or whatever it is. And so when people find vulnerabilities and they try to report them to you, do you have a process to consume that information and to validate that information, to confirm it, that it is in fact a bug or a vulnerability? And in a lot of cases, give credit to those researchers. This is why you see a lot of bug bounty programs, because then they reward the researchers or the people that are reporting the bugs, so that they can then feel this sense of accomplishment and, basically a thanks to finding those vulnerabilities. A lot of times with people that are looking for these, if they are not acknowledged or rewarded in some way, you have this kind of, some of these people have this sense of morality where, I'm going to just tell the world, I'm going to disclose. Instead of responsible disclosure, I'm just going to disclose that vulnerabilities exist. And if people use it, at least it's out there in the world. And so, the people that are using this can find it and kind of punish the company in a way. So it's really an interesting kind of dilemma, but you have to have some way of consuming the information regardless. And frankly, it's in a sense, a lot of cases, free labor, because until they find a bug or find something, you're not going to pay them typically anyway, so they're not on your staff. But that is a real concern if you're not going to take in that information and take it seriously. All right, next article here, Android banking Trojan anti-dot disguised as Google Play update. Banking Trojan impacting Google Android devices, dubbed anti-dot by the Cyber research team, has emerged, disguising itself as a Google Play update. The malware displays fake Google Play update pages in multiple languages, including German, French, Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, Romanian, and English, indicating potential targets in these regions. Certainly seems reasonable. Anti-DOT uses overlay attacks and key logging techniques to efficiently harvest sensitive information such as login credentials. If you don't know what overlay attacks are, it gives a definition here. It says overlay attacks create fake interfaces that mimic legitimate apps, tricking users into entering their information, while key logging captures every keystroke made by the user, ensuring that the malware collects comprehensive data, including passwords and other sensitive input. So this kind of idea where you create what appears to be a legitimate interface or a legitimate web page or anything like that, that idea is not that new, but certainly going after Google Play users or Android users is going to be a massive pool to go after. So certainly in the millions of devices, or I don't know how many Android devices are out there, but certainly if you can go after that giant pool, there's going to be at least a couple that are going to click on said link. It says once installed and granted permission by the victim, it establishes communication with the command and control C2 server to receive commands. Pretty standard. Server registers the device with a bot ID for ongoing communication. That way it can track who's in its botnet. The malware sends a list of installed application package names to the server, which identifies target applications. So they can leverage that information later. They can see if certain applications are present, if they're using vulnerable applications, what kind of applications they're using. So again, they can identify that, hey, you're using a US government employee application or something like that, then that certainly would be valuable information. Upon identifying a target, the server sends an overlay injection URL, an HTML phishing page that is displayed to the victim whenever they open the genuine application. So they are, in a sense, adding something that is further legitimized because the user opened the legitimate application, and then now they get this pop-up, which seems legitimate, right? Because it came from that. So yeah, that totally makes sense. When victims enter the credentials on this fake page, the keylogger module transmits the data to the C2 server, allowing the malware to harvest credentials. All right, let's keep moving here. AI chatbots highly vulnerable to jailbreaks, UK researchers find. That sounds interesting. Artificial intelligence, it's vulnerable. Really? For the most generative AI chatbots are highly vulnerable to basic jailbreak attempts. No! Researchers from the UK AI Safety Institute, the AISI, found. In a May 2024 update published ahead of the AI Seoul Summit in 2024, co-hosted by the UK and South Korea on May 21st to 22nd, the UK AISI shared the results of a series of tests performed on 5 leading AI chatbots. 5 generative AI models are anonymized in the report, but they're referred to as the red, purple, green, blue, and yellow models. The tests that they conducted, and this is pretty interesting, include tests to assess whether they're vulnerable to jailbreaks, actions designed to bypass safety measures and get the model to do things it's not supposed to do. We've seen a lot of research around that. Tests to assess whether they could be used to facilitate cyber attacks, and tests to assess whether they're capable of autonomously taking sequences of actions operating as agents in ways that might be difficult for humans to control. There's a lot of controversy around AI just in general, so this is an interesting kind of study to further that controversy. They said that all proved to be highly vulnerable to basic jailbreak techniques. That's an important finding, with the models actioning harmful responses in between 90% and 100% of cases when the researchers perform the same attack patterns 5 times in a row. So that's a pretty good success rate for sure. Other tests shared in the UK AISI May 2024 update showed that four publicly available can solve simple capture the flag CTF challenges of the sort aimed at high school students. So relatively trivial exercises, most likely. However, they all struggle with more complex problems such as university level cybersecurity challenges. So there is a level of complexity, a kind of a line in the sand where they start having more challenges. And that's as it gets more difficult, obviously. We've seen AI models being used for creating malware and things of that nature. So it is interesting to see that from the kind of high school level to the college level or university level, that is kind of the line in the sand where it starts to struggle. It's not creating, the most advanced next generation malware or solving those kind of next generation problems. So I think that gives us insight into the types of malware and problems that can ultimately cause for us, at least at the current state. That probably will change as these models continue to get better and better, but it is interesting to see. Next article, cyber criminals exploit GitHub and FileZilla to deliver malware cocktail. Multifaceted campaign has been observed abusing legitimate services like GitHub and FileZilla to deliver an array of stealer malware and banking trojans such as Atomic, aka Amos, Vidar, Luma, aka Luma C2, and Octo by impersonating credible software like 1Password, Bartender5, and Pixelmator Pro. A cybersecurity firm, which is tracking the activity under the moniker Get Caught, that's a catchy term, said the campaign not only highlights the misuse of authentic internet services to orchestrate cyber attacks, but also the reliance on multiple malware variants targeting Android, macOS, and Windows to increase the success rate. Attack chains entail the use of fake profiles and repositories on GitHub, hosting counterfeit versions of well-known software with the goal of sensitive data and compromised devices. The links to these malicious files are then embedded within several domains that are typically distributed via malvertising and SEO poisoning campaigns. So that is quite interesting just in general. We see a lot of malicious attackers, threat actors that are posting malicious software posed as legitimate kinds of applications. So it mentioned a few in this article. But more interesting, if you don't remember back, that we actually talked about on this show the idea of this GitHub vulnerability where you could put a malicious file or something into a comment field. For instance, it was with Microsoft into their GitHub repos, not submit the file, and then that file was then hosted under the URL of that organization. So under Microsoft, for example. So this is obviously hosting it in other circumstances or other repositories, other URLs, but this is just another GitHub vulnerability or GitHub issue that we're seeing in today's world. It says the adversary behind the operation is suspected to be Russian-speaking threat actors from the Commonwealth of Independent States, the CIS, has also been observed using FileZilla servers for malware management and delivery. Again, common techniques. Look for common signs. Further analysis of the disk image files on GitHub and the associated infrastructure has determined that the attacks are tied to a larger campaign designed to deliver Redline, Luma, Raccoon, Vidar, Radamanthus, I think that's how you say it, I'm not sure, Radamanthus, Danabot, and Dark Comet Rat since at least August 2023. So it's always interesting to see how long these techniques are going for and how long these attackers are continuing to use certain strategies or certain techniques, tactics. I think that one is certainly interesting. It's definitely not as interesting as the one with Microsoft and hosting malicious repos and files under their actual URL. That was quite a substantial yet trivial kind of technique, but it was a big one. We've talked about that a lot on this show. So Always interesting to look at the threat intel of the day, right? So with that being said, we're going to wrap it up there. That is the last article for this episode. Again, I'm your host, John Good. This is Cyber Threat Intel. It's episode number 38. It's Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. Also, make sure to check out cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. You can find the article feed and everything that we covered on the show, as well as the other episodes. And with that being said, we're going to wrap it up for today, and I'll see you in the next one. See you later. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.